A critical concept in the use of symbols for subversive or negative purposes is that they are part of a methodology of taking something we value and selling it back to us in another form. But there's an important twist about those things we value. We either don't have or we want more of them, and the controllers are well aware of that.
Realize that they're talismanic words, they're being used against you. They're seduction words to try and get you to accept this because you don't have that. Well, you've been raped of that. The people who are selling you one story here have actually taken away the very things that you needed that were in your psyche to begin with.
And are we not in the midst of the biggest example of that phenomenon with Christmas just having wrapped up? The things that we say we value, like giving, showing care to others, peace, joy, and so on, are repackaged through the construct of this mania we go into each year, and it's sold back to us as the season of giving. Meaning, really, the season of buying. This is the follow-up to my initial episode on the use of symbols as a technique of mind control. We covered examples of the first two categories being solar and life force symbolism, which ultimately led to a bit of a tangent, but I think an eye-opening one that took us from the fasces and its well-documented roots in fascism to a U.S. naval base with buildings in the unmistakable form of a swastika and oriented exactly as displayed by the Nazis. The idea that this complex you're seeing with your very own eyes, combined with the Navy's story being that it was just due to errors, well, it got me thinking, what if I change my whole approach to discussing authority on this show? I think I'm going to shift my entire focus to how completely embarrassed we should be as allegedly patriotic and moderately intelligent citizens for accepting this abysmal failure we see playing out in front of us over and over again at every level of the control structure, but mainly in government and with its conspirators. Forget the dark occult roots, the propaganda, the indoctrination, the non-stop assault on our rights, the military escapades founded on lies and deception that you and I get the privilege of funding. Is all that really necessary? Do I really have to convince people all of that's going on? Can't I just point to the end product, just like those buildings, right there in front of our faces, as the ultimate reflection of its nature and character? Join me for this second part of our peek at the subversive use of symbols. Thanks for taking the time to be here. Welcome to episode 28 of the Exit Your Matrix show. Before we go anywhere, on we march in Lysander Spooner's brilliant Vices Are Not Crimes, a Vindication of Moral Liberty. And this section is a little bit longer, so I'll be quoting key portions to keep it manageable, and here's the first of two readings. But it is often said that some vices are nuisances, public or private, and that nuisances can be abated and punished. But it is not true that the mere private vices of one man are, in any legal sense, nuisances to another man or to the public. No act of one person can be a nuisance to another unless in some way it obstructs or interferes with the other's safe and quiet use or enjoyment of what is rightfully his own. Whatever obstructs a public highway is a nuisance and may be abated and punished. Whatever poisons the air or makes it either offensive or unhealthful is a nuisance. Whatever obstructs the light to which a man is legally entitled is a nuisance. So we're moving along with our examination of subversive symbols as a technique of mind control. One thing I want to touch on out of the gate that I didn't emphasize in the last episode is that with the length of my discussions, I'm only able to show you a fraction of the examples of these symbols. My goal has always been to cover topics in enough detail to convey a general understanding, and with the hope that it will spark your interest in researching them and learning more, with the goal of becoming an autodidact, a self-taught learner. So for a really in-depth discussion and to see loads of these symbols, definitely go to the podcast section of whatonearthishappening.com, that's Mark Passio's website, and check out episodes 46 through 50, which include all of the images he comments on, as well as other goodies, like a downloadable copy of a book by David Fontana called The Secret Language of Symbols, a visual key to symbols and their meanings. And of course, I'll include a link to that in the description. And keep in mind that each of those podcasts is 2 hours, so to dedicate a total of 10 hours to the subject of symbolism shows both how rich a topic it is and also how pervasive. All right, let's get into this with the third and final category, which is Astro theology symbolism. So here are 2 Astro theology symbols that I really find intriguing. The first is the pine cone. Now, why would the pine cone be a prominent symbol that would go far back into antiquity and be found across geographically dispersed societies and routinely associated with human consciousness? Well, the reason is its connection to the pineal gland. Some say pineal gland, but I'm going to say pineal. And the pineal gland is one of the most fascinating parts of the human physiology you'll find. The pineal is an endocrine gland that's about the size of a grain of rice, and as you can see here, it sits in the center of the brain at the top of the spinal cord where the 2 brain hemispheres meet. And as you probably guessed, it owes its name to its pine cone shape. It has a number of roles that I don't really have the time to get into, but its primary function is the production and secretion of hormones, and notably melatonin. Where this becomes intriguing and symbology enters the picture is the pineal gland's relationship to the body's chakra system. And the chakra system is complex and remains mysterious, but here is a good working definition. Chakras are a complex and ancient energy system that originated in India. Chakra, the term in Sanskrit, means wheel and refers to energy points in your body. They are thought to be spinning disks of energy that should stay open and aligned, as they correspond to bundles of nerves, major organs, and areas of our energetic body that affect our emotional and physical well-being. Some say there are 114 different chakras, but there are 7 main chakras that run along your spine. These are the chakras that most of us are referring to when we talk about them. Each of these 7 main chakras has a corresponding number, name, color, specific area of the spine from the sacrum to the crown of the head, and health focus. So to bring all of this together, what we have is a structure in the brain that interacts with cerebrospinal fluid, with this fluid serving a number of functions. The fluid moves up and down the spinal cord and into these chambers around the pineal gland. This can be facilitated in different ways, but is largely associated with certain types of yogic breathing that cause the sacrum, this bony structure at the base of the spinal column right here, to move backward into the body and push that fluid upward, which results in those pineal gland chambers being flooded and triggering the what we call opening of this third eye chakra. So with the what and why established, let's take a look at where we see this symbolism. So let's start off slow with a pope. I think this is J.P. Dose, but any pope will do. And notice the staff and where his left hand is placed, right on the pine cone. So that confirms it. No symbolic meaning here. And the imagery is important enough that the Vatican erected this, which is called the Court of the Pine Cone. And that's also the largest one in the world, by the way. Am I allowed to say erected and Vatican in the same sentence? By the way, they don't just think peacocks are cool, those are associated with alchemical symbolism and the 2 brain hemispheres, which are, of course, facing this pineal gland symbol. Now, I'm pretty sure this fella's wife didn't send him out to collect pine cones for their Thanksgiving table centerpiece. No, this is a depiction of an ancient god with the wings showing his capacity of flight and holding a pine cone. I won't conjecture as to what is meant here, but my sense is that it's representative of one of those beings Eric von Daniken referred to in episode 26 as having come to Earth and interacted with humans, and this being emblematic of the consciousness ascension we're capable of and which defines our ultimate goal as human beings. It's all about the transformational properties of this genetic mechanism we have and its role in true spiritual awakening that should be the single greatest focus of our lives. And check this out. The Eye of Horus has widely been associated with the pineal gland. Again, judge for yourself, but you don't have to look far to find sources documenting the connection. So before I get into the second and final category of astrotheology symbols, I want to pause here for a minute and pose a question. If practically everyone says they want freedom and denounce tyranny, Where should we be using those forms of personal currency we have of spending time and paying attention in order to make those things a reality? How about this? Or this? Or this? Or this? All of those are far more appealing to the vast majority of people than the urgent message I'm trying to put out to set that stupidity aside, read books, search for the truth, and engage their own minds. I mean, who the hell wants to do that? I can tell you from my limited experience, not many people. Yet that message is what I and a relatively small group of people have committed to do in service of the truth. A critical element I've mentioned before is discernment, particularly in our sources of information. And there is a huge difference in what I talk about compared to the alternate media or truth movement or whatever you want to call it. I want to be clear that there are some exceptional content creators out there sharing critically important information. Many of them I've been listening to for over a decade. But the vast majority of them don't get to the underlying causal factors of the events they're reporting on. They stay in what I've heard referred to as the realm of effects, not the realm of root causes that brought those effects into reality. I often hear them say that we need to get the bad guys out, the good guys in, pass laws that punish the bad stuff and reward the good stuff, reform the systems, go crypto, grow our own food, live underground, and on and on. Of course, some of those are admirable pursuits and are in our best interests. But the simple truth of the matter is that those types of proposed solutions don't touch the real problem, which at its core is that just about every human being on this planet has been deceived into believing that their rights are granted to them by benevolent protectors, also known as governments, and that claims of authority by one or more people over others are legitimate. They are not legitimate, never have been, and never will be. So give me a hand. Help me spread this knowledge in service of truth and expose people to the real way out, the only way to end slavery. So subscribe, like, and thank you. That was way longer than I intended it to be. And now the second portion from Vices Are Not Crimes.
But it is said again that drinking places are frequently filled with noisy and boisterous men who disturb the quiet of the neighborhood and the sleep and rest of the neighbors. This may be true occasionally, though not very frequently. A jolly or hilarious drinker disturbs the quiet of a neighborhood no more and no less than does a shouting religious fanatic. An assembly of noisy drinkers is no more and no less a nuisance than is an assembly of shouting religious fanatics. Both of them are nuisances when they disturb the rest and the sleep or quiet of neighbors. Even a dog that is given to barking to the disturbance of the sleep or quiet of the neighborhood is a nuisance. I hope some of my neighbors are listening.
All right, here we go with that final example of Astro theology, symbolism, and what, or who, could it be? You'll see in a second. So just when you're recovering from the pine cone, I hit you with the owl. One thing I want to mention as a placeholder is that the owl symbol is related to the dark aspect of the goddess. Dark aspect meaning the destruction or waning of care into apathy, describing those who don't have compassion or empathy. They're qualities of psychopathy, and it represents the killing or extermination of the emotions. Now this is differentiated from the original caring concept of the goddess through antiquity, who was typically depicted in white, so pure, perfect, and with the ability to judge right from wrong. This pronoun-free goddess was in touch with her higher self, living in harmony with natural law and, as a result, in peace with other beings and having the understanding that as one suffers, we all suffer. Basically, she had her shit together. So the depiction of the dark aspect of the feminine, this withdrawal of care, has been shown in the form of a predatory bird, the owl. And this is one of the most commonly used symbols of the dark occult and is associated with the feminine quality of care, or lack of it, that I've covered in the past, given that it's been under assault for a very, very long time. And of course, the dark occult, the owl, it's nocturnal and is mostly active in darkness. There's also an eyesight, a vision component here that has meaning. The owl is a predatory bird that uses its exceptional night vision as its prime advantage over its prey, which can't see it, or at least nowhere near as well.
Remember, field mouse is fast, but the owl sees at night.
That's kind of creepy, ain't it?
Wisdom is also associated with the owl in the phrase we've all probably heard, the wise old owl. But while the dark occultists have knowledge, they don't have wisdom. And that's because wisdom is the act of bringing right action or moral action into manifestation. But as I said in my opening comments, their knowledge is of the human psyche and its workings, including how it can be influenced and manipulated. And make no mistake, that information has greater power than any weapon you or I can conceive of, and it has been exploited with overwhelming success. Isn't an honest assessment of our current condition sufficient to show how effective it's been? Being a bird, an owl has greater perspective by virtue that it can fly, which also indicates a higher level of both physical altitude, but also of knowledge. Interesting that rabbits are a key source of food for owls, and wouldn't you know, the rabbit has traditionally been associated with innocence and, in some traditions, fear. So the association is this owl symbol feeding on innocence and fear. So let's go owl watching, shall we? First up, we have some images related to the Bohemian Club, which is a social club founded outside of San Francisco in 1872 and has come to include some very interesting members. Henry Kissinger, Walter Cronkite, Clint Eastwood, Ronald Reagan, Richard Nixon, Mark Twain, Jack London, and they are especially known for their annual summer retreat at what is known as the Bohemian Grove, which is in the Redwood Forest of California's Sonoma County. I will include a link to a video with some investigative work that Alex Jones did back in 2000, and so far as I know, he has footage of ceremonies that went on there at one of their summer events, so you can go there and check that out for more detail. And then we have the weaving spiders come not here mantra, trying to give the outward appearance that this is, no work is being done here, this is purely recreational, and for people to let off steam when actually the opposite is true, and there's quite a bit of power broking that's going on there, and all you have to do is just do a little bit of research on this and you'll find that out for yourself. And this one was new to me because this is actually just up the road from where I live, and this is the Frost Bank building in Austin, Texas, and you be the judge, but it seems to me to have a very owlish demeanor, and especially at night. And finally, we have the Mac Daddy of them all. This is Washington, D.C., which, I hope you knew, was named after Columbia, of course, who was the first American goddess and was modeled after Greek and Roman goddesses, especially Athena. So not much here, right? Well, how about now? Of course, I've only scratched the surface here, and if you'll check out those What on Earth is Happening podcasts I mentioned earlier, you'll also learn about pentagram and all-seeing eye and dove symbolism, to name just a few. Then he goes deep into one of the Mac Daddies of symbolism, Freemasonry. Seems Confucius was right when he said that signs and symbols rule the world, not words or law. Well, that'll do it for our examination of subversive symbols, and next time we'll chat up the final method of mind control, false flag attacks. And if the material I presented so far hasn't offended or alienated you, let's give that topic a shot. As always, I appreciate you taking the time to hear this information. And it's been a while, so let's have a final quote from Arthur Schopenhauer. All truth passes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. Third, it is accepted as self-evident. Brilliant. Until next time, be well and remember to always do your own thinking. Do I really have to convince people all of that's going on? Can't I just point to the endless... Wow. Can't I just point to the end product, just like those building? Can I just point to the end product, just like those buildings? Right there, in front of our facies. Can I just point to the end product, just like those buildings? Right there, in front of our facies? Before we go anywhere, on we march in Lysander All right, let's get into this with the third and final category, that calls the bodies. And this can... No, I'm not happy with that. I want to go back. And notice the staff and where his left hand is placed. Right on the pine. That was not good. By the way, they don't just think peacocks are cool. Those are associated with alchemical and denounce tyranny. Where should be... Of course, some of those are admirable. Of course, some of those are admirable. Of course, some of those are admirable. That's funny. Where should we be using those for? One thing I want to mention as a placeholder is that the owl symbol is related to the dark. It represents the killing or the extermination of the... Sad. Well, that'll do it for our examination of subversive symbols. That is subversive symbols. Until next time, be well and to remember to...